Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on high performance computing. Today, my guest is from Univa. We have Fritz Ferstl. He is the CTO of the company. Fritz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're recording this in mid-March. I'm in San Jose for the GPU conference, but I wanted to get a chance to catch up with you and kind of learn more about, where is Grid Engine today? You and I worked together at Sun Microsystems way back when they acquired the technology back in 2000, I believe. And a very loyal following, a lot of Grid Engine users out there. But I thought, why don't we just go into your slides and find out the state of the union?
Okay, so let's talk about that then. Let's switch to the first slide here, I guess. As a way of introduction, maybe first just a few words about who Univa is. Not everybody might be intimately familiar with our company. We're specializing in data center automation, are based in Chicago, have a number of offices around the globe, one of them being in Regensburg, Germany, where I'm living, and also where the Grid Engine development team is situated. We have been growing quite rapidly in the last 2 years, whether you look at numbers of customers, bookings, or whatever metric you apply. And we have a unique positioning in that we call ourselves the home of Grid Engine. And actually, throughout this slide deck, I guess it will transpire why that's the case. But in a nutshell, we do employ the Sun Grid Engine core development team. And we have basically the biggest and most challenging sites that run Grid Engine contracted by us. So they use our software and our support and those types of things. Next thing I wanted to do, since we talk about the Grid Engine State of the Union, is first do a very quick recap of the Grid Engine history, which is on the next slide. I doubt that everybody, even those who have been using the product for a long time, are fully aware of the fact that it actually has a 20-year of history, even a little bit more than 20 years of history. The initial commercial developments actually were done by myself in 1992. And I say commercial developments because the roots of the technology actually date back a little bit further. It was a shareware by Florida State University, and we had a contract with them to commercialize that software, and that led to Grid Engine. As I said, that started in 1992. First customer shipments were then in 93. We did some major collaboration projects with companies like Raytheon in 1996. And added something that was known as the GRD policy module back then, GRD standing for Global Resource Director. That's all now in the Grid Engine world of stuff, more or less. But back then it was separate products. The company that I was working for at that time, Genius, which was a German company, merged then with a US company called Chord Systems into something that was called Gridware in 1999. And that got acquired by Sun in 2000, and we relaunched the product as Sun Grid Engine back then. So since 2000, the name Sun Grid Engine actually came about. Then in mid 2001, a major milestone happened. We open sourced the software, at least parts of it, and that was really the case until 2010. So the software was open source for 9 years. During that time, there was a massive growth in the adoption of the technology. Certainly more than 10,000 sites are using the technology. Yeah, then in 2010, as we all know, Oracle acquired Sun, and so the acquisition actually closed in 2010, and shortly afterwards, the open source activity was closed down by Oracle. There were 2 open source forks being ongoing at that point in time, but there was no contribution from Oracle anymore. Oracle in general didn't display too much love for HPC, so the Grid Engine team, at least the core of it, decided to join Univa. We actually have been working with Univa at Sun for many years as a partner, so that was an ideal place to go for us. Univa had been providing services and add-on technology and products around Grid Engine already at that time. So it was a perfect fit. And so that's what we did beginning of 2011. We're now with Univa a little bit over 2 years. And now we're currently in the third major product release of Univa Grid Engine. So that's a little bit of recap of a history. And just for the next slide, to point out the major event that has really changed the game when it comes to Grid Engine is that Oracle basically ended something that lots of users were quite comfortable with. Grid Engine up until then was a development of a product in the open. There were feature developments, there was support, there were bug fixes, there were qualified binaries, and those things ceased to exist. So the choice is now stay with open source or go with Univa Grid Engine, basically. And just to re-emphasize on some of those points again, in slide number 5, there is a little statistic that we have looked into. So I was saying that Grid Engine was an open source project, but I mean, depending on how you define it, I would actually challenge whether that's really an accurate name for a project like Grid Engine. I would rather say it was a open product development. In the 9 years of its existence, there was 79% of all the contributions in terms of check-ins were really done by Sun engineers, and only 3% came from the open source. Now, that's actually a friendly statistic for the open source community, because if you look at lines of codes which were changed, so that means added, modified, or deleted, then it's even more drastic. I mean, it's way over 99.8% that were actually done by Sun paid engineers, and the rest only by open source developers. So in other words, what you see here is that it was really something, a product development that was funded by Sun. It was done in the open, and the community basically contributed, on the email aliases, best practices, and similar things like that, but no code development. So the evolution of the technology and of the product was dependent on the Sun engineering team. And that Sun engineering team went to Univa. Another point that is important to point out is that in May 2011, when we released our first version, which was Univa Grid Engine 8.00, we actually contributed most of that code to the open source. We really wanted to stabilize what was out there in the open source. I mean, when Oracle closed down open source contributions, this was in between 6.2 U5, which was the last Sun release, and another release that was then a Oracle closed source release. And so that intermediate state was not really satisfactory. It wouldn't compile properly. It had lots of bugs in it and stuff like that. So we wanted to make sure there's a sound basis for anybody who wanted to use open source. So we actually contributed a large share of our developments that we did initially to the open source. And those were about 600,000 lines of code changes. So if you compare that to 30,000 lines that were actually done in 9 years by community contributions, this was the by far biggest contribution by a factor of 20 actually, compared to a summary of what was done in 9 years. So that's really the type of relation that you see between open source development here and funded development on the other side. So let's look at Univa Grid Engine for a moment. I mean, where we have arrived, and that's in the next slide. I mean, in a nutshell, we basically say that we help organizations play a better game of Tetris. So that means, we look at workloads, what resources they require, what demands they have, and we fit them into the cluster environment that the site is utilizing. And on top of the software as such, we provide the active development for Grid Engine. That means we add features, we do bug fixes. We listen to customers and take their input and try to put those RFVs into the product. We obviously have active technical support, so that's one of the main things. If customer needs our help. In our particular case, support also includes configuration help. So if a customer has a question about the configuration, needs to optimize the environment, then we do that. We integrate with third-party tools, whether they are software or hardware. An example would be NVIDIA GPUs, since you, Rich, are currently at the GPU conference. So that's one of the things that we have been doing. For instance, the same goes for Intel Xeon Phi. We also have been integrating with those. Then we do add-on products. As I mentioned, Univa had those already prior to us joining Univa, and we continue to do that. And I have a little bit more information on a later slide about that. Grid Engine always was among the most scalable solutions of its kind. So we actually have commercial customers who run way above 100,000 cores. So commercial deployments, that's certainly the biggest that you can find. We also offer training if customers are interested in that. As mentioned, we have partnered with HPC hardware and software companies. I've mentioned Intel or NVIDIA, for instance. And then another interesting thing is, the whole big data movement. So we do not only have an integration, as many claim these days, with Hadoop. We actually have commercial customers using that integration. And I don't have time in this slide deck or in this conversation to talk about that in depth. But what it basically does is allows you to share your cluster across Hadoop workloads and other workloads. Or if you have Hadoop workloads from different organizations, you can share a cluster with that without any conflict. And you can policy control who gets how many resources and similar things like that. Next slide, a short look at what we have accomplished with that product. So first of all, we have been putting in the investments that were required to evolve the product and provide the support. We have been investing in the feature evolution. So that comes out at 3 major product releases, 25, actually by now it's 26 production patch releases. We have over 450 improvements. We have added those to Grid Engine. And our product evolution is really targeted at improving the total cost of ownership for Grid Engine. So that means on the one hand, reducing the time that an administrator requires to actually work with the product, or the learning curve that an end user has in utilizing the product, or improving the utilization of the cluster and similar things. And we provide add-on products. I've mentioned that a few times already. And here are the 3 that we provide. So one is Unisight, which is a data analytics tool that gives you insight into how the cluster is being used. You can do capacity planning with it. You can do accounting and reporting with it. Another one, which we currently have in beta, is a license orchestrator. Actually, software licenses are sometimes the most expensive asset that an organization is managing. We have customers that are spending north of 20 million per year just on license usage. So much more than on the hardware, actually. And so managing access to those licenses and making sure they're always properly utilized is for them the key task that we have to solve. And we provide a specific product in support of that. And then finally, UniCloud, which is a cloud automation platform. And with UniCloud, for instance, you can create a Grid Engine cluster on a push of a button in your local environment if you want, or on a cloud, or you can do cloud bursting. that the whole story is successful will probably be visible in the next slide when you look at customers that we have. I mean, this is just a sample. Worthwhile to note is that 82% of our revenue is actually coming from enterprise customers. We do have research customers, we do have education customers, but the wealth of our customers comes from the enterprise. If you, I mean, all the logos are probably confusing, but if you look at them a little bit in detail, then you will see that there are customers from all segments. So, for instance, from the energy segments, you see Aramco, BP has petroleum gas services there, for instance, or chip design. You see Panasonic, Mentor Graphics, Synopsys, Motorola. That's the Google branch, Toshiba. Life sciences, there is Bristol Myers, Johnson & Johnson, Archimedes, Vertex. Manufacturing, you see BMW here, Cummins or Tata. Another interesting set of customers that we have is from the transportation business. So, for instance, airlines or other transportation companies. They do crew and fleet management, so making sure that you get an airplane at your gate and actually a crew along with it, and other things that is required for the plane to take off. So those types of things are actually done with Grid Engine, and they're done with the software that's provided by one of the customers that you see up here, which is Jeppesen. So they have that software, and Grid Engine is integrated with, and is being used by lots of those transportation customers. So there's many more here, obviously, from government, research, education, and I don't want to spend too much time here, but as you can see, it really goes across the board. So with the next slide, let's look a little bit more in detail what we offer at the end of the day to a Grid Engine user. So one very important thing is, which we have been trying to make sure, is that Univa Grid Engine is a drop-in replacement for anybody who's using some version of Sun Grid Engine or Oracle Grid Engine or an open source Grid Engine. The migration is basically the complexity of an upgrade. It's very easy. In some cases, you could even do binary replacements, but usually people don't do that. So they just go through the regular upgrade procedures, and that works very well. The technical support comes from our team. So those are actually people who have been working with the Grid Engine technology even back prior to the Sun acquisition days. That's why I was actually putting up this history of Grid Engine. So most of my team members are with me for more than 10 years, sometimes 15 years or more. And so these guys really know what they're doing. We provide, obviously, the usual security and maintenance patches, hot fixes and stuff like that. But what's very important to many customers is that we also provide configuration help and tuning guidance. I mean, installing Grid Engine is easy, but tuning it to get the best out of your resource pool is sometimes a little bit more complicated, and that's what we do here. Then obviously the continued product development. So that includes new features like, for instance, the Hadoop integration or something that's called job classes. So completely new development, not just marginal enhancements, but really into the internals of the product, which only the experienced team that we have can do. We support new hardware infrastructures like GPUs, PHYs, or ARM processors. We just recently released that. Then, as I mentioned, we provide access to add-on products. So, for instance, this Unisite reporting and accounting technology is a part of the Grid Engine bundle. We also have rewritten and improved the documentation. You get access to that. And I mentioned already that we have a bunch of new products such as UniCloud or License Orchestrator that's coming. And we also are currently working on a native Windows implementation with some customers are asking us for, and which is important to them. And last but not least is indemnification from open source technologies used in Grid Engine. Like every software nowadays, Grid Engine uses a bunch of open source technologies. And should there be any licensing issue with any of these, then we indemnify our customers against them. So that's part of our license agreement, obviously. Then just a single word on where we are today in terms of the product release cycle in the next slide. So the current major release of Univa Grid Engine is 8.1. And there is sub-releases to that. The most current is 8.13, which was released around supercomputing last year in November. And there is an upcoming release in April, which is 8.14. So those deliver obviously bug fixes, but also smaller feature enhancements. And I'm not going to go into any detail about the particular features that you see on this slide for the 8.1 release, but just want to clarify that what we're looking for, what we're trying to do is basically drive up the total cost of ownership or the return on investment the customers have with Grid Engine. So the features try to improve throughput, try to improve utilization, or reduce the effort that the customer might have, or drive down the cost that they have. So these types of things we do, and examples are you can find here, like for instance, improved diagnostics. If it's much easier for you to diagnose a problem, it's much easier to do that. Yeah, so in summary, on the last slide here, which has some content, so what we provide is really evolving forward with the Grid Engine technology. So we want to lower the total cost of ownership with the innovations that we provide. We give you improved value with the new products that we deliver alongside with the Grid Engine technology. Then we provide support whenever that's needed. I mean, for customers like Saudi Aramco, for instance, that's even during weekends. And then we provide peace of mind if you really have an issue. Then we're there to help. And Grid Engine is just Univa Grid Engine is just an upgrade, so it's very easy to get all those benefits that I was going over. And with that, we're pretty much, I guess, at the end of the slide deck. And I think, Rich, you will have a number of questions. Just skipping to the last slide and pointing out that if there is any more information needed by someone from the audience, they can always check out our website, or they can contact me at the email address that you can find here. And there's also more information coming up with a few future conversations that we both are going to have, for instance, about the big data topic in particular, or about the HPC architecture evolution, and how we can respond to that from a resource management point of view, and similar topics like advanced features that we provide. So with that, I would like to thank you for your patience, and you might have a few questions.
Sure. Hey, thanks for that, Fritz. It's always interesting to see the evolution of something like this, and I had no idea it went back to the early 90s like that, so I appreciate that. I had a question about the cross-platform nature of Grid Engine. I think, we were having a discussion last night with some HPC guys, and we tried to count the platforms that are out there, and I think we came up with 12 different kinds of chips and things you could do to do high-performance computing. But it seems like Grid Engine's always been there just with support of all kinds of diverse hardware, now even ARM. Did that grow organically, or was that the idea from the beginning?
Yeah, so I would not necessarily say it was the plan from the beginning. I mean, if you look back at the 90s, obviously the market was very different. You had vectors, you had mini supers as they were called, and then you had the emerging cluster technologies. And back in the days, you had risk platforms, and the market was really undecided what to use. So it was simply what the market did demand. So we had to support all those different platforms back then. And if you look at what you see right now with like GPUs or the Intel Xeon Phi, that's all pretty much yeah, a little bit of a replay of what you have seen before, certainly with a little bit of nuances here and there. But once you have the type of things in the code that support those different platforms, and once you have the expertise, it's not so hard to support those different types of architectures. And as a matter of fact, for instance, the ARM port took less than a week. So it's not something that is very hard from our point of view.
So Fritz, speaking of support, right? I'm sure you don't necessarily have 100,000 cores down in the basement in Regensburg, right? So how do you do that at scale uh, for problems that come up only at when you get into these big numbers? Do you work just closely with the customer to work it out, or how does that go?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It always has been a bit of a challenge, obviously. So, due to the fact that it always has been a challenge, one of the things that we have built into the product are all kinds of emulation, simulation types of things that allow you to mimic certain situations that only occur at bigger scale, even though you don't have the environment being that big. Another thing is we make a lot of use of all kinds of virtualization container type technologies, be that virtual machines or be that something like Solaris zones or Linux containers and stuff like that. And then we do have a fair-sized test environment. We also use Amazon if we need to go bigger. And at the end of the day, if something really occurs only at the customer environment, we have to work with the customer, right? There's just no alternative.
Yeah, yeah. And Fritz, I was looking at your slide with the customers, and I was just trying to calculate in my head the market cap of those enterprises is probably combined is bigger than GNP of most countries. So a lot of money at stake there. That Grid Engine is part of their IT, and I'm wondering about is it important to those kind of customers to keep their um, their clusters busy, right? Because time is money. And Grid Engine, how does Grid Engine play a role there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned somewhere during the presentation that we have customers who spend $20 million in software licensing for that cluster that they operate on the Grid Engine for the software they run there a year. And that's just the software licensing, right?
Yeah,
Add to it the hardware, add to it the energy cost, and you're looking at many, many tens of millions per year in spending. And if Grid Engine fails, if it fails to schedule jobs, then that stuff is just producing heat. Right?
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
doing anything useful anymore.
Hmm. Right.
And the company's production cycle of whatever products or whatever they do depends on the functionality of the cluster. I mean, let's say a chip design customer could easily miss tape out and then not be able to have a market launch when they need it and stuff like that. They could use millions if they just have a few days of downtime. So it is very, very dependent, very, very important for those customers to have a dependable workload management software. And that's really why those customers, buy from us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Fritz, kind of a wrap-up question here. I wanted to ask you about, people that might be interested that want to try Grid Engine, I mean, how difficult is it to kind of kick the tires or see for themselves if it's going to work for them? Is it easy to try?
Yeah, it's very easy. So actually, we offer a free trial off of our webpage. And it's actually a unlimited trial. It is restricted in the core count that you can utilize, but otherwise you can do with it whatever you want. You can even use it for your production environment. Again, it's very limited in the core count, but it's certainly sufficient to give the software a try. And installation of Grid Engine always has been something easy, specifically for people who have been using previous versions. So that's a very easy thing to do.
Hmm.
If a customer wants to try it in the production environment with more cores and stuff like that, then we do provide something that we call a full trial that not only gives you access to the full software, so in the free trial there are a few things missing, but it also provides you full access to our support infrastructure. You're basically being treated like a licensed customer for the time of the trial, and you can then, form your opinion.
Well, Fritz, I guess we should wrap up here. I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the good work.
Okay, will do. Okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on high performance computing.